Welcome back to another vehicle system video, and in today's episode we will have lights for our vehicle. So we will be able to toggle these on and off. We're gonna have a fake effect for the lights looking like they are turning on, even though in reality we just changed the material, but they are shining on the ground and all that good stuff. We have brake lights and we also have the turn signals. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So this episode is going to be a little bit lengthy, and in this episode we are only going to cover the single player part of this, and then in next week we are going to come back to this, modify this just a little bit to make sure that this actually works for multiplayer as well. Only single player in this video because, yeah, like I said, this is going to be quite a bit lengthy. So the first thing is that in order for us to see the lighting a little bit better, I'm going to disable the lights in the level itself, because also in the real life when there's daylight and you turn your car lights on, you can barely actually see them shining on the ground. So for us to see this better and to test this better, I'm going to make this into kind of like a night time. So let's go ahead and let's look for our light sources. So first I have a directional light for which the intensity I'm going to set to 0, and also for the skylight I'm going to set the intensity to 0 as well. So now we have everything is very dark, and it is going to be a lot easier for us to see what's going on. So now that we have done that, let's go ahead and let's open up our actual vehicle. And in this one, I actually already have gone ahead and I've added a bunch of things to this, so just to make this a little bit shorter, because this is going to be very lengthy to adjust all the positions and all that stuff. What I've essentially done is that my front lights and my rear lights are just regular spotlights, and then I have an extra ones on the rear end, so duplicates for the rear end lights, and those are used for the brake lights. And then I have just spotlights for my turn signals, so I have 4, and those are on each corner. So the basic idea behind this is, so I have the first, let's talk about the front lights. So I have 2 front lights. So what I did was simply go ahead and add yourselves a new vehicle light controller. Name it whatever you like this to be. I called mine regular front lights. So for now, I'm just going to leave it be vehicle light controller. So it doesn't matter what the controller's actual name is. This is just for yourself. And then what I did was I just added some spotlights to this. You can use point lights as well, but I think for the front lights, the spotlight will work a lot better. Now go ahead and adjust it to where it should be, and go ahead and adjust the attenuations, the inner cones, outer cones, all that stuff, and just know that the intensity value doesn't matter. You can set this to 0, you can set this to 99999, it doesn't matter, because this is not going to take effect. The radius and the angles and all that stuff and the positioning is going to matter, but the intensity is not going to matter. So if you want some of the info, what I have, so here it is. I have my left light. It is roughly around here, so make sure that this cone doesn't shine on the vehicle itself, because that otherwise is going to look very awkward if it's going to shine on the vehicle. So make sure that the cone is shining past the vehicle and onto the ground. Also, I'll angle this a little bit downwards like it actually is for real cars. You're not supposed to shine in other people's faces. The attenuation radius is 3000 units, so that's basically how far it can go. Then I have the inner cone at 30 degrees and the outer cone at 35 degrees. And it's a white light, and that's basically all I have in here. And I have 2 of those. So I have one on this side and I have another one on this side. And that's pretty much all that there is to it. So go ahead and create these 3 things. I'm going to delete the ones that I made before. Those are quite useless. So we have the vehicle lights group, and then we have 2 lights inside of this. Now, what now is important to understand is that if we would select our lights controller, we have a light controller config, and then we have the relations. So go ahead and add a new entry. I already have added one, and I called this one regular lights. Now, whenever we will enable the group called regular lights, it's going to set these 2 lights, because they are under this controller, it is going to set these 2 lights at an intensity of 50,000. So basically, whenever we enable this specific group, this controller enables these lights. It kind of seems a little complex, but when you think about it, it is a very simple concept. So let me show you what I mean by that. So go ahead and create this group, regular lights, and this is going to enable these two to have the intensity of 50,000. Now let's go ahead and let's create the same thing for the rear lights, pretty much the same system. So I have two lights right here, but these ones are colored red. They have less attenuation, less radius, because those are the rear end lights and they don't need to shine far away. We just simply need to see them a little bit on the ground. And then in the controller, we have the same group. So basically now whenever we enable the regular lights, the front lights will be at 50,000 intensity, but the rear lights are going to be only at 500. So now with one switch, we are enabling two light groups, as long as we are enabling this regular lights group. Now, how to enable this is actually very simple. I'm not going to do this in this vehicle because we can use the same naming convention throughout all of our vehicles. So I'm going to set up the controls in the master, and this way, as long as we keep the group names the same, it's going to transfer that information over and it's going to use it for all the vehicles that are made under the vehicle master that we created in the first episode. So let's go ahead and open up our vehicle master. Over here, very simple. All I'm gonna have is a keyboard key H event, and on this event what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle lights active, and now we need to provide this light group. Now go ahead, select your light group. So mine is regular lights, and we are going to paste that in. So now this is going to toggle them on and off depending on their state. And after we have done anything, after we change anything for the lights, we need to run the update lights function, which essentially updates the whole thing. It goes through all of the lights that we have on our vehicle and it enables the ones that need to be enabled. So by having this simple code, so toggle update on the keyboard key H in the master, and by having provided the active group naming in the controllers, so two of these, we can hit play. And if we press H, you can see we have the front lights and we have the rear lights toggleable on keyboard key H. So now let's go ahead and let's start working on our brake lights. So essentially what I did was simply selected all of this and duplicated. So these three rear end lights, and all I did was I renamed them. So these are the stop rear lights for the controller, which doesn't matter the name, and these two stop lights for the names, again, it doesn't matter. The settings are exactly the same for the lights, I think. They should be at least, so let me double check. Yeah, so all of the settings are the same. Attenuation at 200, inner cone at 25, outer cone at 30, and both of them are, well, all four of them are red lights. Now, the difference between these is that this vehicle light controller has a different relations group. So this group is called stop lights and its intensity is 5,000. Now, whenever we will enable this group, the intensity of these specific lights are going to be changed to 5,000. So let's go ahead and go to our event graph in our vehicle master, because that is where we have our vehicle input brake, because obviously we want to set this on whenever we brake. So I'm going to bring this back a little bit and we are going to do a couple of things. So the first thing that I want to do is so we have three essential functions in the lighting. There is the update lights, there is the toggle lights, and then there is the set lights active. So I think these are pretty self-explanatory. We are updating stuff. Oh, and there's another one, get lights as well. Get lights active. So these are pretty self-explanatory. So the set one obviously sets the status active on or off, whatever we set it to be for that specific light group. Toggle obviously swaps between, it changes the state from one to another, on or off. And get obviously returns the information about in which state it is right now. And update light should be ran after any of these are getting ran, so that the system would update the lights. They say that's for the performance purposes. Not quite sure, haven't really dived into understanding this fully. I just know how to make it work. So the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and I want to get the lights active, because I want to know whenever we do something with our brakes, I want to know what is the status of our brake lights at this point. So we need to use our group's name, which in my situation is the stop lights. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in here. There we go. Then after that, I want to do an if, but not on this condition right now. I'm going to use this active status a little bit later. The first thing that I want to check actually is whether we need to turn these lights on or off before we do anything else, because we need to know whether the brakes are on or off. So from the access value, I'm going to check if this value is bigger than 0, because at default, when we don't push on the brake, the value is 0, and when it goes above 0, that means that we have pressed on the brake and the lights should come on. So this is going to be our first condition, because depending on this one, we are going to do different things. So this condition goes right over here, and then from this if branch check, we actually want to run 2 more if branch checks. We want to have one up here and one down below from the false route, and that is because we this event right here is like a tick event. It gets ran all the time constantly, and we don't want to change our light status and update them constantly. We just want to do that once whenever we need to do that, because otherwise it's quite pointless, and this way we are reducing the cost of performance a little bit. Probably not a lot, I would assume, but if we get a lot of these locations and we use a little bit of a performance in every bit of a little situation, then it's going to accumulate to quite a lot. So for the bottom one, we can just get our light status and plug it in directly, because for both of these, I'm going to use the true route. So if the light is not bigger than 0, so that means if the brakes are released, then it's going to go through the false. And then we want to check if the lights are on. Now, if they are on and the brakes then are released, then we want to set the lights active to be false. And we want to use the same group name. So stop lights should be set at false. There we go. Now, if we are releasing the brake, so it's at 0, so this means that we are releasing the brake, it's false, and the light active status is at false, so this one right here, then we don't want to do anything, because the lights are off, the brakes are not on, everything is the way it's supposed to be, and we are good to go. Now for the top piece, this thing right here, we want to check if the lights are off, because if we plug it in, it's going to basically tell us true or false whether the lights are on or off. But we want to, I personally want to use true on both of these. Obviously you could use false as well. What I'm simply going to do is from this, I'm just going to get a not value, plug it in, and now if this will return us false, then this is going to turn that into true, and we are going to go through this route. So then again, we can set lights active. If you decide not to use the not, then use just simply the false route. And in that situation, in up here, that means that we are pushing on the brakes and the light is currently off. So we need to turn it on. Also copy the light group name. And after we have changed our lighting, just simply update the lights themselves. There we go. And that's pretty much it for the rear and brake lights. So now if we hit play, and now even if we don't have the lights enabled, we can see the brake lights. We can enable with the H, and whenever we brake, we can see a more red color because the brakes are getting pushed. There we go. So the brake lights are good to go. Now the next thing is going to be our turn signals. So I'm going to use the left bracket key event. So I'm going to have the left bracket right here, and over here we actually will need some Boolean conditions to know the status of our lights. So I'm going to call this left blinker on, and I'm going to duplicate this variable, and I'm going to do the same thing for the right one. So I'm going to have the right blinker on, There we go, we have that. And then from here, what we actually want to do is first we want to do an if branch check, because we want to check whether our left blinker is already on or off, because if it's on, we want to turn it off. If it's not on, then we want to turn it on. And after we have done that check, let's go ahead and let's set our variable straight away. So on the true route, it should be changed to false. On the false route, it should be changed to true, so that it's basically like a toggle on at this point. Now, let's go ahead and let's work with the off first, because that's a little bit more simplified. So if we want to turn the lights off, but they are on, so it's going to set that the blinker, left blinker on is false, so for the boolean. But then at that point, we also need to set the lights active to be at false value. And then after that, we can update the lights. Now, right now, I don't have any group because I didn't show you, whoops, didn't want to do that. I didn't show you the lights that I have for that, but let's just set up the code and then let's go to the light piece, the actual lights themselves. So we have this bit right here. Now, on the other side, we have the false, where we want to enable our blinkers. So over here, what I'm going to do is, instead of set, I'm going to toggle the lights active. And that is so that we can actually use like this blinking effect, and because we're going to have a delay on this and it's going to turn it on and off, on and off. So after we toggle the lights, we want to do the update lights so that it knows the new information. And after that, we can do a delay, and I'm going to use like a half a second delay, so 0.5. And after the delay is done, let's do an if branch check to see if the turn signals are still on. So let's go ahead and let's plug in our left blinker on. And now if that is true, then we can just simply go back to the toggle lights active. And this way it is going to allow it to blink every half a second. There we go. Now at this point though, we are not really disabling this because, well, on the false, it's going to stay stuck in that specific status. So from the false route, what you want to do is go ahead and set your lights to be false for the active, so that they would get disabled. So it is going to look something like this. Quite a bit of code, and it's going to get even worse because we are going to add the other light, and then we are going to add the I guess it's called hazard lights, so the emergency ones. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's look at the actual lights in our sports car. So I have another vehicle light controller, which I called left blinkers, which doesn't matter the name, and I have just point lights. So it doesn't matter, you can use spotlights, you can use point lights. On this one, I prefer these to be the point lights so that it shines a little bit on the vehicle itself, because I'm going to talk about how to make the effect of the looking like the lights are on the vehicle itself, because that's a totally different story, because those pieces don't really shine on the actual world. Well, they kind of do, but they don't really do as much as you would like it to do. Anyway, so we have two spotlights. Again, the attenuation radius in my situation is 300, and those are just orange lights. That's not important. What is important is that in this vehicle light controller, we have again added a group, and I called mine left blinker group. And the intensity on this one I set to 500. So now we need to grab this group and paste it in over here so that our left blinker would use the left blinker group. So we have two of those. We can now compile and save this, hit play, and whenever we click the left bracket, you can see our turn signals are blinking. So now we click it again and it goes off. So we can toggle it on and off if we like to do so. There we go. And now for the other side, just simply copy paste this part, replace the bracket event with the other bracket, so the right bracket, and just drag and drop your right blinker on top of all of these Boolean nodes so that it would replace left with the right, like so. And again, in the sports car, I did the same thing for the other side. I just simply copied the whole thing, moved it over to the other side, adjusted the y-axis, and for the group, I renamed this to be the right blinker group. And that's all the difference that there is in it. So again, on the right bracket, let's just replace this like so. There we go. So now if we hit play, now we're gonna have a couple of issues because we can turn this one on and we can turn the other one off, and they will look something like this. So you can see it doesn't really look that great because, well, yeah, that's not really how they are supposed to work. So now we need a couple of more checks before we can do this, because we got to make sure that we turn off the other light before we can enable this one, because like in real car, when you turn left or right, when you turn on the signals, you can only choose one or the other. Or you can obviously enable the hazard lights, but that's a totally different thing. You can't have these running in a different pace sort of thing. You can with some modifications, obviously, but by default it doesn't work that way. So let's move these events back a little bit. And I'm going to move these guys in a little bit. And now before we run that code, let's go ahead and let's run another if on both of these. We have another if. Here we go. And let's plug in. So we have the left bracket, which should be for the left blinkers. Let's make sure that our right blinkers are actually off. And now instead of the true route, it should be connected to the false. So now if the right blinker is false, if it's off, then it's going to turn the blinker on, the left one, and we need to do the same thing for the other side. Check if the left blinker is off, and if it's false, if it is off, then, well, we can enable the right blinker. So now you will see that we can't enable the other one while one is still on. But in this situation, maybe you want to just have it so that you can quickly toggle between one and other, and so that you don't have to disable the previous one, but you can just jump from one to another. So this is where the true route can come in. So what we can do over here is actually run a sequence, which will allow us to perform 2 tasks. Well, you can have as many tasks as you like, but in my situation, all I need is just 2 tasks. So over here, we are trying to enable the left light, but the right one is still on. So I'm going to do this from task 2, then 1. From over here, I'm just simply going to go to where we are disabling the light, which is over here. So the task 2 is just simply going to disable the right blinker. And the other one is just simply going to go and enable the left one, like this. And we can do the same thing over here. At the bottom, we can again run a sequence. So the second, then 1 is going to go up here and disable the left blinker, and then 0 is going to enable the right blinker, like so. So now if we give it a try, so we have this one and we have this one. Here we go. So far so good, everything seems to function just fine. And now let's talk real quick about how we can make sure that it looks like the actual lights are on, because at this point, well, they still seem to look off. All we get is the illumination or lighting or whatever it's called on the ground, but the lights still seem to be turned off. Now this comes down to changing the materials. So let me go ahead and open up my model real quick. So this is my vehicle base model. And now it is very important that we can change the material just for that light itself. So for the front lights, both of these can be ran through the same material, and it's going to be way better if both of these are ran through the same material. But for the turn signals, we should have 2 different materials, one for one side and one material for the other side, so that we can actually change that specific instance of those materials. Now I'm only going to change the front lights because those are the only ones that are set up good on this model, so that I can easily change these. But yeah, it's the same principle applies for all of them. The same idea, but yeah, you just gotta make sure that you are using a material for that single instance. So let me show you real quick what I mean kind of by that. So we have, these are the front lights. So if I change the material, you will see that only the front lights change and nothing else gets changed on the model. And that is exactly how we are going to be changing our lights. So I have a yellow material and I have another yellow material. And what I simply did was, so this is just a yellow color, and all I did was I grabbed the color, I ran a multiply node, and I multiplied this with 10, and plugged this into emissive color, and this essentially will project a light out of the material, kind of. So the higher you go, the more intense it's going to get. As you can see, it's kind of like a little bit shining. So if we would go to our materials real quick, our base mesh, and we just swap this material with the other one, there you go. It looks like the lights are on now. So that's exactly the method what I'm going to be using. Quite simple. So since this information is living only in my sports car and it has its own materials, its own hierarchy of materials, other models will probably have a different one, basically the order of the materials. All I know is that for this specific model, the element 1 for the materials is the one that is used for the headlights. So in the event graph, what I'm going to do is use a keyboard H key event, because that is the one that is getting used to toggle the lights in my vehicle, in the vehicle master right here. Here we go, this guy. So in our sports car over here, what I'm going to do is get lights active, and I want to get my front light group, so the regular lights group. So I'm going to check the status of that group, and then I'm going to do an if to see if the regular lights are turned on. Now, after that, we need to get our vehicle mesh, because that's where this is the model piece of the model which is getting the color changed. So from here, I'm going to set the material, and I'm going to do this for both true and false routes, like so, and connect the target for both. And so now, if this is true, then that means that we are turning the lights on, so we should be using our yellow on material, which is going to be glowing. And the other one is just the regular yellow material, like so. Now, one thing is that we need to change the material index, and like I said, I know that mine is the element 1, so the index on this one is going to be just 1. And the last thing that you gotta make sure you do is that if you're using the same key event, you gotta click on this key event and you gotta uncheck the override parent binding. You gotta set this to false. Otherwise, only this bit of code is going to be ran. Now, if you disable this and you set this to false, then both the child's code and the parent's code are going to be ran, and it's going to work just fine. So go ahead and hit play, hit H, and there we go. The lights are getting toggled on and off, and it looks like the lights are actually shining, even though in reality they really aren't. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you like this. In the next one, we're going to work on the multiplayer piece. So yeah, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Join my Discord, Patreon, blah blah blah. See you in the next one.